welcome back, everybody, to the Trial of the Force podcast, a Puerto Rican podcast talking about Star Wars and other nerd-related media. Welcome to season 6. We had originally initiated it with an interview with Dr. Chris Kempshall, and now we continue with a guest co-hosting spot with Andrés Alvarez from Sithty Minutes. How's it going, Andrés?
I'm doing well. How are you, man?
That's a
It's an
interesting
understatement.
question. It's an interesting question because I don't know. I don't know. It depends on my social media engagement. Depends on
That's true.
how, like, if it's dinner, if it's work, if it's I don't know. It's I feel like there's a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about, and we'll get to all of that. But
Yeah.
before we get going, we have to mention that this is not only a special episode because it's the second episode of our sixth season celebrating our fifth year of podcasting, although that's in August. So 5 years, not yet. But it's also the Star Wars Podcast Day special episode. And for those of you who have been listening to us in the past, we have been joining the Star Wars Podcast Day celebration for the last couple of years. And today we're also very happy to continue that tradition with Star Wars Podcast Day 2025. And as most of you know, and for those who don't know, I'm going to let you know, we are celebrating the anniversary of Jedi Talk, the very first Star Wars podcast, which premiered on February 7th, 1999. A
Jeez.
year which we didn't know how good we had it back then.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
The Matrix did, though. The
Oh my
Matrix
gosh.
knew that that was going to be the pinnacle of
That's right.
society and civilization.
The Wachowski sisters knew, like, oh, we actually peaked here. Y'all don't know
They
it yet, but this is what peak cinema looks like.
they knew, they knew. But yeah, thanks again for joining us. I mean, you're definitely no stranger to this channel. We've had you many times before. It's been a while since you've been on. So
That's true.
tell us a little bit about what's been going on with your life and 50 minutes.
Yeah, so the podcast has been doing really well. We've been doing more interviews, kind of on like the politics and Star Wars side, of course. We've had more elected officials, and this year, because of my day job, I'm very much like a kind of like an advisor to Mon Mothma kind of role, if for folks who need a Star Wars parallel. So I'm not the one making political decisions, but I'm definitely in the room and around people that are making political decisions. So it's let me get a lot closer to a lot more elected officials and kind of understanding a bit more of how they work or issues that are important
Mm-hmm,
to them,
mm-hmm,
which has made it easier to make episodes that kind of speak to like, hey, this is what's happening in the world around us, and helping people kind of wrap their head around it, other than the 20-second audio clip that you get
mm-hmm.
on CNN, the all caps headline, and then you just kind of have to sit with it and yeah, it's all kind of like smoke and mirrors, and folks aren't really sure how nervous or how much hope there actually is in a situation. So it's been nice having those conversations. I
Mm-hmm.
slowed down a little bit on High Republic, but I think that's more of a sign of the times. Because as we know, and I'm sure your listeners and viewers know, if you want to get your heart broken and you're a Star Wars fan, High Republic is indeed for you. Um, so somewhere around the election, I was just so I was just already feeling beaten down, and I was
Mm-hmm,
like,
mm-hmm.
I want to start Tears of the Nameless and Tempest Breaker, but also I don't know if my heart can take like any more
Tears of the
pain right
Nameless,
now.
good, good. I will say that one
Yeah.
did it a lot. Like so
Okay.
far, I feel like it's the best one of Phase 3 right now.
Ooh.
And and related news, Charles Soule revealed the cover for Trials of the Jedi, and that was a good one. It's my phone background right now, so
That
you
is a
you, you gotta
good
you gotta
background.
get you gotta get going, man, so you
Yeah.
can get
I
on
mean,
that, get up to date with High
I
Republic.
did start Tears of the Nameless today. So at the
Okay,
time
good,
of
good,
this
good.
recording, I'm at chapter 2. So fresh
Damn,
out of it.
you're a fast reader.
I
Oof.
know.
It was taking
It's
me
it's
forever to get to.
audiobooks. I'm cheating.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah,
And you have it at 1.25, so you go a little faster.
absolutely. I'm actually really dialed in now. I have it at 1.4 because I'm a lunatic.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But Yeah,
They're
but those
good,
dramatic pauses are just awkward pauses now because
right?
they're like, they're literally like a millisecond of a pause now.
And it's a balancing act too, because then you don't want to get like that voice distortion where it goes so fast that the pitch changes. So
Yeah.
I personally, audiobooks is not like a thing that I can concentrate on because I'll just get distracted. It just becomes background noise. So I have to stick with traditional physical books and just read
Fair.
slowly. But I think in this day and age, with everything that's going on, maybe slow is it's a little better. I
Yeah,
feel like we're going in a world that everything is so fast paced with all the chaos and horrors that are being hurled in every direction our way, that sometimes it's good to just stop, unplug,
absolutely.
and take our time and breathe. And it's something that I definitely want to talk to you about. And you were mentioning how now you're seeing how the sausage is made and talking with the politicians that are you know there doing the things that a lot of us either hate or love. And it's funny because we're kind of now all victims and being held hostage by a system that is shoving that down our throats. But coincidentally, too, and serendipitously, last week, we initiated like the triad of the fourth season with our interview with Dr. Chris Kempshall, in which we were talking about the rise and fall of the Galactic Empire. And while during that interview, we couldn't really go into the nitty gritty of contextual inspirations or commentary that Dr. Kempshall was infusing into the book. Now we can, and
Yeah,
it's funny because a lot of that book really has. It was a very special book because we haven't really gotten a book like that, and I know you were also able to interview Dr. Kempshall not too long ago as well. So, what was your perspective interviewing him? Because you interviewed him before. Uh, T-47, Trump,
yeah,
P-47, Trump 47, whatever you want to call him, is back in office. So, what was your perspective interviewing Dr. Kempshall then before the inauguration, but kind of seeing where the wind was blowing, and then now going through it all? Because I feel like me going into that interview with him was just like, oh crap, like we're in the fall of the Galactic Empire, and maybe for you was a little different. So tell us a little bit
yeah,
about that.
yeah. I really have to say, like thinking back on the book itself, um, it really feels like there's a lot of moments in the book where Beaumontkin talks about the New Republic, and he has a lot of moments where he's like, we thought we were building something better, we thought we were doing something different, but clearly it wasn't enough. Or there's this like general feeling of obviously it didn't work, or obviously we weren't as aware of what was happening around us. We weren't as like ready for the way in which like evil was moving around us, and the things that were happening, and the way that our enemy was preparing to kind of come back as the First Order.
Hmm.
um, and Beaumont even kind of makes comments about how, like, I wanted to finish my studies, I was doing all this other research, and I thought, I could go back and just be a historian. There's references where he mentions, like, I had to go from being a historian to picking up a blaster and learning how
Hmm.
to become a rebel, and fight in the resistance and for the New Republic. So I think in retrospect, it really feels like we were more in that moment,
Hmm.
um, in that same vein of, because when you even think back leading up to the election, there was a lot of that same kind of people putting on blinders and being like, well, of course he's not going to win again, right? That can't happen. That won't
Hmm.
happen,
Hmm.
et
Hmm.
cetera, et cetera. And then when it did, it became this
Somehow
awkward.
Palpatine returned. Yep.
Yeah, like Rise of Skywalker has never been rehabilitated so much as it has been now, because it
At
was.
least it's less absurd. Let's put it that way.
Sure, yeah, yeah. It's like Poe's line
Yeah, yeah.
obviously has a lot more significance now, and like it ain't that goofy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and as a prequel lover as well, I've also been seeing the memes of folks being like, oh,
Trade Federation. Yeah.
it turns out the taxation of trade routes actually is a pretty hefty and relevant political topic, but that was happening in 1999, right? Like
Hmm.
lo and behold,
Lo and
right?
behold, 1999. Who
It's
knew?
all it's all
Who
coming
knew?
full circle.
Uncle George. He was onto something.
He was onto something. A few decades too early, but we got there eventually.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think like now in retrospect, I find that interview so interesting because it's in that same vein of like it won't happen again, so let's just understand how we got here.
Hmm.
And Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, does a really good job at kind of giving you and showing you all the pieces that take you from the prequel era all the way to the Battle of Exegol. And now, we're living through a post like Battle of Exegol or maybe a pre-Battle of Exegol moment where okay, the Emperor's back and
Hmm.
he's got forces and they're loyal to him, more loyal than before,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because
Yep. Yep.
even if you look back at the first Trump administration, you had folks like God, who was his first attorney general?
I don't.
Trying to
I don't.
think. He was
Oh,
from
Bill Burr, wasn't it?
no, he
No,
was
Bill Barr. Bill Barr. Bill Burr's the comedian. My bad.
yeah.
Uh,
Although that would still attract. No, he ended up being a second one too, but I'll find it
oh,
in.
Bolton. Bolton.
No, he was something else too.
My God.
But
Well, whatever.
well,
Immaterial. A horrible white guy, probably.
yes. But he ended up stepping down. Oh, Jeff Sessions. There he is.
Oh, yeah. He went.
Yeah,
He fell
remember
into
him?
obscurity
Yep.
immediately.
Not even on the radar anymore.
No,
Um,
man.
but even when you look back at the first Trump administration,
Hmm.
right, you had people like Jeff Sessions. Bill Barr also ends up resigning towards the end because
Hmm.
of everything that's happening in the lead up to January 6th. And he's realizing that, the emperor's wearing no clothes and I'm not going to be on this sinking Star Destroyer, so to speak. And now
That's good.
it's
That's good.
like, these are first order stormtroopers, right? Like these are brainwashed, like they are ready to go. They're ready for their orders. They're ready to
Hmm.
do whatever it takes. Like RFK's an anti-vaxxer, and he's nominated to run the secretary or the Health and Human Services department. So like literally a wolf watching the henhouse. Pam Bondi is the Attorney General nominee,
Hmm.
and her claim to fame is that she was the Florida Attorney General, and
Didn't she
when
just get confirmed? Actually,
oh, I think she definitely might have.
I
Yes,
think
she
that's what
is
I.
54 to 46. 2 hours ago. Good Lord. Breaking news.
That's what. Hey, Blue Sky. I mean, granted, I still feel the horror in Blue Sky, but at least it's exclusive. The horror is exclusive to what I want to see, as opposed
For sure.
to Twitter, the platform formerly known as Twitter, where it would just be not only the horrors that I wanted to see, but additional horrors that I did not need to also
Yeah.
be privy to. But there's we can talk about this ad nauseum, and I do want to pick this up again towards
Yeah.
the end because I want to. There's one particular thing about looking towards the future of Star Wars that'll reignite this conversation a little bit. So I want to save some of that future
Yes.
proofing
Absolutely.
towards the horrors that are barreling towards that at breakneck speed, but let's have like a little fantasy where we can
Yeah.
unplug, even though we know that despite the claims of everyone that Star Wars isn't political, as we are witnessing live, the prequels were basically a documentary. But we don't want a documentary, we want a projection of sorts. And in that regard, I wanted to talk a little bit about, and this is not a news channel, if you want a news channel, just go watch any of the other 100 Star Wars YouTubers that recap news, but I think it
Absolutely.
would be interesting to talk about Rey's new Jedi Order film because it's one of those films that I'm very excited for, and I think you are as well.
I'm
And
ready.
one of the big things that have been coming out about it is that there's been a lot of turnover in the screenplay writing department. And then last week or 2 weeks ago, January 24th, it seems, a new writer was announced or reported through the Hollywood Reporter. George Nolfi has joined the team to help craft the screenplay and finally help, hopefully, finalize the script so that Daisy Ridley can grab the lightsaber and and punch some new space fascists. So,
Yeah.
what did you think about this news? Because I think for a lot of people, and I'll speak for myself on this one, it's a lot of whiplash because it's just like a movie that you're excited for and you want to see succeed, but somehow or another, it's just like not finding its footing, and it's upsetting, right? Especially now with this whole administration too. It's just like, are they winning? They took the acolyte away from us, and now they're gonna take
Mm.
away Ray as well. So how do you feel about the new Jedi Order film, which is what everyone's calling this film, even though it's not the official title, and the news that we have a new writer for it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm excited there's a new writer. I've now gotten to the point that I will believe there's a new Star Wars movie when there's a date, and I can go
Mhm.
on Fandango or wherever and buy a ticket and get my seat and be like, cool, I will be there on, Thursday night, Friday morning, whatever time it is. Um, George Nolfi as a writer, I'm pretty interesting. I'm very interested to see in like what that is going to add to the film.
Mhm.
I his kind of most notable thing, at least as far as like Variety and everyone else is concerned, is being like the Bourne Ultimatum.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
Bourne films are pretty good in terms of like the intrigue and like, there's a lot of stuff happening beneath the surface than what we see, and there's like plots to unravel and layers of plots. So, to me it bodes well in terms of like for a movie that could potentially kick off another trilogy or just another era of storytelling. It's nice to have a writer that is comfortable in that space of both like having action but then also being able to juggle all these different kind of plot points, or being able to show you one thing but really it's something else that you need to be paying attention to or that's going to come up later. So I'm curious to see it. I think if anything, the biggest feeling I have about Ray's movie is twofold. Like on the one hand, I'm so ready to see what happens after Palpatine gets obliterated
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
the Sith Eternal are
Allegedly.
allegedly,
Allegedly.
allegedly. Um, but seeing the Sith Eternal kind of gone, or at the very least not as major of a threat anymore, or as organized. Like they could
Mhm.
still be a major threat, but they're definitely not as organized as they would have been under Palpatine. So I'm excited to see what's on the other side of that
Mhm.
horizon.
Mhm.
Um, and then on the other hand, I feel like a big part of why this is going so slow or like taking so long to really get developed and put out there is my one honest criticism of Star Wars in the Disney Lucasfilm era, which is there is so much fear it feels from me on the outside looking in as a fan,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
of Disney to go beyond the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
Like and I can't blame them to some degree, right? Because like they gave George Lucas like $4 billion
Mhm.
to buy this, so they've already made their money back. But like
And then
you
some.
yeah, but you don't want to milk the golden cow too hard too fast, and then
Mhm.
it just like all crumbles to dust. Um, so I feel like Disney is just kind of really taking their sweet time with it, because whatever this movie becomes, whatever new villain they introduce, or whatever new version of like deep dark evil that is going to surface,
Mhm.
it's going to have to be something that needs to stand the test of time, like George Lucas's Empire and Palpatine and
Mhm.
Vader stood the test of time. Because Disney's still making money off of Vader costumes, right? Like
Mhm. Mhm.
Vader
Well, I mean,
lightsabers fly off the
for
shelves.
this
So
week, we'll see the release of. I mean, at the time of recording, it hasn't released, but by the time this releases, Legacy of Vader will be out, which is an
yeah,
interesting name, right? Because it's a Kylo Ren comic book, but branded under Vader. Because as you said, we gotta
right,
milk it. We gotta milk it.
that's
Eh,
right.
no, and I agree with you, and it's very interesting because as much as I like for them to take their time so that they get it right, it also feels frustrating, right? Because they
Mm,
announce these things and then there's a history of projects falling apart or being swept under the rug or being canceled, that it doesn't inspire hope. So in many ways, it would be better if don't even announce it. Don't announce it till contracts are signed, and
yeah,
you're leasing the space at Pinewood. to begin filming, don't even put it out there because it's too much suffering for us fans. And then you give ammunition to all those fire Kathleen Kennedy people who are just gonna use it as gasoline to the fire to be like, see, they don't Lucasfilm doesn't know what they're doing. So I'm always frustrated with these news because I'm like, yes, I'd rather you take your time, figure it out to put on out a good movie, but it's also just like stop, stop messing up.
Hmm.
Like, so I don't know, but it is interesting because I am hopeful for this movie because it hopefully, like you said, going beyond the Skywalker saga will give us what the sequel trilogy, which as much as I liked it, but it did not deliver anything new to us, right? I
Mm.
love The Force Awakens. I love The Last Jedi. The Rise of Skywalker exists, but it's still the Rebels versus the Empire, and there's not a lot of innovation in terms of visuals or stories. Even though, I mean, I could go all day about how The Last Jedi actually is innovative, but it's we're treading a lot of the same territory, and I
Sure.
feel that the new Jedi Order film can do a lot of what a lot of us would have wanted more of from the sequel trilogy. And like you said, introducing new villains, new characters, new motivations, new worlds. So
Yeah.
so I hope beyond hope that it'll be good. And another good sign for that film, which is just conjecture on my part, is today the announcement that Oscar Isaac is going to be at Star Wars Celebration Japan. So
Oh,
I mean, it doesn't mean anything necessarily, but it's interesting. The man hasn't been to a Star Wars celebration in a photo op or autographing capacity, and coincidentally, he's gonna be on this one. So I'm trying not to get my hopes up, but it wouldn't,
yeah.
it wouldn't be such a bad thing if either there's a whole Disney Plus show to talk about, the Rangers of the
Oh
New
man.
Republic, spin that off in a new way for the New Republic as a way to, journey to New Jedi Order. But I don't know. I
That
don't
would
know.
be cool. I feel
Uh,
that way about Manny Jacinto being at Japan.
yeah.
I was like, it could just be the victory lap for Acolyte, so they could have had that planned forever ago. But another part of me with my tinfoil hat is like, you don't send someone like Manny over to Celebration of all places unless there's like something else to talk about. If we want to get really into it, my super, super tinfoil hat theory, y'all heard it here first, is I feel that the Acolyte, the series, will be no more, right? So there
Mhm.
won't be a season two of the
Yeah.
Acolyte
Yep.
because I feel that it is a trilogy of one season
Yeah.
shows,
Yep. Yep.
with the
Yep.
first one being Acolyte, the second one being The Apprentice,
Yep.
from the perspective of like Chimera and the Stranger,
And the Master. Yeah.
and then the Master, where it becomes a cat and mouse game of between Plagueis and Yoda, with Plagueis ultimately obviously getting away with it, so that Yoda kind of feels like, oh yeah, it wasn't the Sith after all. Like we're all just chasing shadows, and then boom, right into Phantom Menace, right, where no one
Hmm.
believes that they're alive until Qui Gon Jinn's like, I definitely fought a Sith on Tatooine.
Yep. And I don't disagree with you. I've talked about that before as well because I mean, and the report just came last week or something that
The
what how
Illuminate
many
one,
two not the 2.7 billion minutes watched or some thing
yeah,
that where it's like the second most watched Disney Plus thing of the year. I mean, it's like I mean that defeats the original narrative of where the executives were saying that, oh well, the viewing doesn't justify continuing the story. So I think there's a lot of layers to everything. I do think that there's truth to the conspiracy that the DEI show is getting cut because we don't want more fan backlash. But I also do think that maybe there's marketing play being like, well, we want to rebrand it as something else, but we don't want to say anything because we're waiting for Japan. So I think there's a lot of moving parts to that, and I do agree that I mean, you don't put Plagueis and Yoda at the end of that
hmm,
of that show and then be like, oh, never mind, we're not gonna follow up on one of the most infamous
yep,
villains that we've never shown before in canon. I know there's the Darth Plagueis novel, nerds. That's Legends. We're talking canon.
that's
Uh,
right.
But we'll see. We'll see. What's 90 days till Star Wars Celebration in Japan? So
Yeah,
not a long time to wait. But you
no,
did say
not at all.
something. You did say something interesting, and it kind of made a good opening to talk about two things, and it's about how we revisit the past. And one of the things that you mentioned was how the sequel trilogy has been afraid, and how Disney and Lucasfilm has been afraid to move past the Skywalkers or even integrate them into a lot of the stories that move beyond Return of the Jedi. And I think that there's a lot of things to be told about how you connect to the familiar and the past in an exciting way, and a way that you can do it in a boring way, for the
Yeah.
lack of a better word, and to be polite and generous. And we're going to talk about those two things. And I think that was a good segue to do that, because I think one of the most boring ways that has been done to the Skywalkers in a revisiting of something, and this is just my opinion, and I want to hear yours, is through the Battle of Jakku comic series, which I was very excited for, because when it was announced, I'm like, finally. Originally, I thought it was going to be a reboot of the main Star Wars series, and it's just okay. We're moving past Return of the Jedi, and then it was
Mm.
revealed to be like a short condensed series, a comic a week, and 12 issues, and leading up to the Battle of Jakku. And it's like, okay, we kind of know a lot of that story, but it's still post Return of the Jedi. It's Luke, Han, Leia. Let's do this. Obviously, it's been announced week two ago that rebooting the main Star Wars comic line in a post Battle of Jakku world. But I must say that for a comic series that I was very excited about, and as a non-committed comic book reader, because I don't read most of the comic books, I was very, very disappointed with this series. And I know when we were texting about talking today, you hadn't read the whole thing through yet. So, having done so, am I crazy? Was this series actually great, and I just didn't get it?
No, maybe we're both crazy. So I guess I'll start with that to give a little insight. But no, I agree with you in the sense that like it's really hard, and maybe this is like also a part that makes it not as exciting or not as like fresh in a lot of ways, is that the plot when it revolves around these characters can't be done in a way that really gives you proper stakes,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Like, we know Adelhard is a kind of major villain in here, but like if you've played, for me, I approach the Battle of Jakku from the perspective of having played Battlefront 2,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And like that ends at the Battle of Jakku. So like Adelhard isn't mentioned in it. And, part of that is when things come out and when the story group has these conversations. So, like, I give a little bit of grace there. Um, but because there's so many definitive elements of the Battle of Jakku, there's almost no wiggle room to do anything that is actually going to kind of keep you on the edge of your seat.
Hmm.
Um, I was speaking with my wife before this recording, and as I was finishing the last issue, and I bounced things off of her too to be like, am I just being too much of a Star Wars nerd about
Right,
this,
right,
or
right.
like, you
Am I a
know,
toxic fan? Am I
right,
am
right,
I
like,
becoming the thing I hate?
yeah, yeah. Until now, have I become the very thing that I swore to destroy?
Yeah, yeah. Am
Um,
I gonna be on Geeks and Gamers now?
but it's like there were multiple attempts on Leia's life,
Mhm.
and I was like, Leia's pregnant in this series, and like it's hard for me to take the attempt seriously, even though some issues end on cliffhangers of like no one's safe, and it shows like Leia in the crosshairs, or like we're going to Chandrilla, and like we're gonna strike fear into the
I mean, but
rebels.
there are ways to feel pressure, even though they're gonna make it out alive. But I feel like there's ways to write it in which you're actually worried about them, even though you know that
Yeah,
they're gonna, survive. Obviously, because of the timeline. But I agree with you. Like at no point did I care, because in many ways it felt rushed, right? It was rushing to the finish line, and then everything seemed very convoluted and repetitive. And it was
Mm.
for me, like, with all the double crossing and triple crossing, and then it's all characters that I don't know who they are. So I'm just like, wait, but who are you? And then you disappear for an issue, come back 2 issues later, and I was just like, what the hell is happening here? It
Yeah.
was it was a lot of and maybe I don't know, maybe it's my undiagnosed ADHD, and maybe it's my expectations for a series, but it was just like very hard to connect with it. And then as a Luke Skywalker fan, I wanted to see a lot of Luke Skywalker lore in it, and in many ways, it felt like Luke was a passive actor in this story. Like he wasn't a
Mm.
protagonist at all. He's just around these other rebel pilots and heroes that are actually doing things to further the plot, and Luke just happens to be there. So in many ways, I feel like the agency of the main trio isn't really there because they're not actually active actors in the series. So how did
Yeah.
you feel about their portrayal beyond their protagonist shield?
Yeah. I feel like I agree in large part just because of we're being shown that this is the kind of final fight and that our heroes need to come together one last time to actually finish the war.
Mhm.
And they're not really the main actors in it. I almost feel like the run would have been better served being like this is a story of the everyday
Right,
people
right.
that made
Like
this
Battlefront 2.
possible. Right. And it's like Iden Versio
I thought she
has
was gonna be in the comic in the last issue,
I
like in
know,
the
right?
background, like here I am.
Yeah, or just even, like she could have even had a throwaway line of like, I know Adelhard, or like I've done
Hmm.
missions around him or something like that, and like nothing. But a big reason that Iden Versio has her own fan base and that there are people who like do her cosplay and like I play
Hmm.
a Star Wars trading card game and she has a leader card because like she has a following and has this really rich story from which to draw from is because Battlefront 2 made it a point to center Inferno Squad
Hmm.
and be
Hmm.
like, there's no Force users here. There's just, the one mission with Luke is there, but it's really
Hmm.
more of like to get Battlefront players in tune with
Yeah,
playing a
yeah,
hero for when you go in multiplayer and can
yeah.
play as a hero. Um, but yeah, it's like the arc and the cover art and all the things that are tied to the Battle of Jakku series very much give the impression of like this is Luke, Leia, and Han's actual last mission. Um, and they do some important things, right? They have some connective tissue in there. It's not
Hmm.
like they're just, window dressing or anything. But to your point, there is no major plot point that hinges on them. Like Lando is there, but
Hmm.
he's just trying to survive until the Spice Runners and the Acolytes of the Beyond and everyone else turns on Adelhard. Like Han
Hmm.
is there, but his biggest thing is that he rescues Luke at the end.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, he even shows up sort of kind of a little too late to save Leia. Like Leia's there and she's doing stuff, but
She's just
like
talking to Mon Mothma about things. It's like, oh, we have to do
yeah.
things. They were basically the Democrats in our current political climate. They're just like, how do we? If only, gosh darn it, if only someone would do something about this. She's
Mhm.
like,
As Chandrila's
you.
blowing up.
It's like you are the ones that have to do something about this. Um, but yeah, I mean, in a world where we could not have had this comic book series, I'll take it.
Sure.
But it definitely worries me that, and this is not a slight against Alex Segura. He's a fine author, and I know he's written lots of other good Star Wars stories. But if this is kind of like the prelude, because he's gonna be the one writing the mainline Star Wars stories and moving forward, because Charles Soule is gonna be writing other stuff. Uh, I'm, you know, not that I'm not excited. I will read the main Star Wars comics when it's rebooted later this year. But if he's going to be the writer of them, I'm kind of like, oh, if this is going to be how those stories are, then I'm not too
Yeah.
confident.
I would say Alex was probably put between a rock and a hard
Hmm.
space. I just think at the end of the day, like the Battle of Jakku and writing a story post Endor, but ending at the battle, is just this area where you can't really do too much. And, it's the same criticism I brought up earlier, where it's like, if I'm playing, like when I played Jedi Fallen Order and
Mm-hmm.
Survivor, great games, both of them, highly recommend them. But there's two times that you will see Vader in that. And both times I was like, whatever the heroes told me that they're going to do is not going to happen. Right? Because Vader only gets defeated once, and it's literally on the second Death Star while Emperor Palpatine's shooting lightning at Vader's son, Luke Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, anytime a Jedi or someone's like, oh, we're going to take the fight to Vader and today's the day he dies, I'm like, sure. Um,
Is it?
is it
Is it?
so? It's like you have that. You have the fact that the Battle of Jakku, in and of itself, has already been, pieced apart. Like battles that changed the galaxy, which Dr. Kempshall was one of the writers on.
Mhm,
The tactics of that battle were picked apart in that reference book. It's referenced in Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire.
mhm.
Uh, Aftermath, an entire book trilogy, like has entire conversations around what's happening in the galaxy at that point. So it's like I don't know if that's so much a reflection of Alex Segura as it is like the timeline and just how little room there is to
Mhm,
nip and
mhm.
tuck at anything.
Yeah.
And you can't make anything that's too earth shattering or exciting without being like, oh, this is just a reference to Battlefront 2 or this is just a reference
Yeah,
to Aftermath.
I
And
agree.
like, and then again, a comic is only what, like 12 pages and however many panels per page. So it's like you can't even
I mean,
retread some of those moments because that's like you're talking about throwing away a third of your comic space to do something that's like,
yeah,
look, there's a whole video game, there's a whole book, there's a whole whatever if you want to learn more about that aspect of the Battle of Jakku.
yeah. It felt no, and I agree with you. It's definitely a complicated point in time to tell any
Yeah,
story. And again, yeah, we've looked at it from so many different perspectives. It's like, how many more can we
yeah.
look
What
at
I
it
would
through?
give to be CC'd on those emails between Alex Segura and the story group,
Yeah, yeah.
because I'm sure there was like 15 or 20 drafts of this story that someone had to write back from the
Pablo
story group, and
Hidalgo's
it's
just like,
like,
actually, you cannot
yeah,
do that
yeah,
because X, Y, and Z.
yeah, that Star Destroyer can't be there. Ooh, sorry, the Acolytes of Beyond don't have Vader's helmet at this point, so you can't do a weird vision of them holding the helmet or something. It's like
Yeah.
I'm sure there were all sorts of stories that like Pablo and someone else in the story group was just like, you can't do that because that doesn't fit into this point in the timeline.
Well, hopefully the rebooted mainline Star Wars series has the shackles taken off and is able to actually go into these uncharted territories that we've been wanting Han, Luke, and Leia to finally go uh, in a post Return of the Jedi war, and obviously a world, and obviously a pre Force Awakens world. But I'm still concerned because you read Shadow of the Sith, right?
Yes.
Because even in that book, I didn't. I also felt like Luke was a passive character, or like he's supposed to be the main character, but things just happen around him, and he reacts to things as opposed to being the main character of the
Mm,
book. And that's it's not a slight against the book at all. I thought it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it, but I still haven't gotten Luke to be Jedi Master Luke and go finding relics and temples and do all the crazy stuff that we just want him to do without being shackled by plot and canon. It's just
yeah.
like let's start doing some new stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I can see that.
But whatever. This is a positive channel, so we're not gonna beat a dead horse here. Um, but it does tie into what we were talking before about a boring way and you can connect to the familiar, and then an exciting way in which you can connect to the familiar. And I think that an example of connecting to the familiar in an exciting way was Andor season 1. It's like we're in an era that
Mm,
we know and to death because we've looked at it from so many different angles, but both Rogue One and obviously Andor prove that we can do new and exciting things within things that are familiar. And to that end, I feel that it can be done because it has been done before. So
Yeah.
I feel like we just have to be less afraid of the preciousness of characters. And I feel like you said that the fear around using Han, Luke, and Leia in new ways is a shackle, and I don't know why. It's just like you don't have to reinvent the wheel too. Just go into Legends and kind of pick and choose from there. There's lots of good stuff there. I just bought the Heir to the Empire comic book adaptation because I read those books decades ago. So I kind of want a refresher since I've read like all the Thrawn stuff recently. I'm just like, hey, let me read the comic book adaptations. I can refresh my memory. And it's like there's lots of cool stuff in there.
Yeah.
So I'm not
Or
saying
just even like
bring
I
the Yuuzhan Vong,
yeah.
but
I I also think of like, going back to Battle of Jakku because there were some interesting elements of Weasel's there, who's
Mhm,
part of the Cloud Riders back from Solo, and it's like that's an interesting kind of like loop back in the series. The Spice Runners of Kijimi,
mhm,
with another Bliss at the top of the food chain there, which we know from folks who have like followed Poe Dameron's life. Like Poe Dameron's going to be a Spice Runner of Kijimi, so like
mhm,
this isn't just some like random fringe group, that they have real power, and it's I feel like the Battle of Jakku series could have been much more interesting if it wasn't about Luke, Han, and Leia.
mhm.
Like if it made it about, a few issues that are like, well, here's how the acolytes of the Beyond are treating the death of the Emperor and the plans that they have. Here's how the Spice Runners are coming to it. But like those plots feel secondary
Mhm,
to Luke,
mhm.
Han, and Leia racing against time, even though their plots and their worries and stuff are kind of already mapped out
Yeah.
well beyond this comic run. So yeah, I'm like, why not make it a Spice Runners comic series? Why not make
Mhm,
it the last of the Cloud Riders being like, oh, we're at the precipice of the
mhm.
end of the war, a war that, like this whole story could have been told from Weasel's point of view as flashbacks with
Right.
like young solo
I
moments.
totally forgot that Weasel was in it. Yeah, because it kind of it felt a lot like Deadpool and Wolverine in many ways. It's just like here's
Yeah.
cameos, here's a Weasel, here's a Doctor Afra, So I was just like, okay, but are they coming back? And that's just no, they're not. And it's
Right.
like, oh,
Right. It's like
then
they're here,
cool.
they give a nugget or they give a little speech or a little like, oh, this is an important battle and we need to be there for it, or like it's important that you make the right choice, and then they like disappear, and it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, this could have been a story of Weasel being like, I remember when we first got that coaxium from young Solo, and like now Solo's a general in the rebellion, and every
Yeah,
all signs are pointing to Jakku, right? Like
and
there's
and Weasel has aged amazing. He still looks like he did like during the early days of the
mm,
rebellion. Good. I
movie
mean,
magic. You really can't.
Han looks like absolute dog shit, but Weasel looks exactly the same. So
I didn't
I
actually
want whatever supplement he's taken.
I didn't actually believe that was Han until people were like, "Hey, Han," and like he was in the Falcon. I'm like, "Oh my god, that is
Which
Han."
I thought was a nice callback to do the Battlefront Han that has like the beard at the time,
Yeah,
so you can
yeah,
like be like, okay, there's a story group did its job with continuity, so I'll have to give them that. But let's stop beating this
yeah,
horse, otherwise they'll we'll get arrested for beating on
absolutely.
a corpse here. But something that's interesting, and we were just talking about it on how to visit the familiar in an exciting way, is something that I'm very, very excited for. And we just got a snippet of that. When you read it, you're like, holy crap, not only is this going to be a good book, but it's also going to be a book that's very necessary for the times that we're living in. And I just want to quote one thing real quick before I say what book it is. But here's a quote from the book, and this is Mon Mothma speaking, where she says, "Every day there's some new edict from the Grand Vizier citing the Emperor's authority, judicial appointments no one asked for, an entirely new plan for this regional governor business. They're deliberately burying us in changes," which is such a kind of terrifying thing to read in a Star Wars book from 2025,
Yeah,
considering the last 3 weeks that we have been living through. But that is from the highly anticipated book The Mask of Fear by Alexander Freed from the Reign of the Empire trilogy of books, which I'm very, very excited for. How do you feel about those books? Are you as excited
Yeah.
as I am for those?
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. I will say that initially I wasn't too sure how I felt about it because again we've got Andor season one. I know season
Hmm.
two's on the way, so I had that kind of initial nervousness of like, is this gonna be us accidentally retreading Andor? And it's like that series isn't even over yet, and we're already like,
It's yep. It's not and or. It's both and.
that's right. That's right. But as I'm hearing more about it, I haven't read the Alphabet Squadron books, but I have
Excellent.
heard the
Definitely recommend.
praise
Yep.
of Alexander Freed and the way he writes, like the nuance of what it's like to be fighting these
Hmm.
battles. Um, and I'm very hopeful in terms of like one of my favorite things about Star Wars when I think about it and as it relates to the real world is that these are not easy decisions, right? Like we as the audience know that the Death Star has to be blown up because we're seeing it, we're the omniscient viewer. We know that Vader and the Empire has no desire to use the Death Star in like a peaceful, benevolent way to
Hmm.
like rule with authority or anything, but like they're using it to subjugate, and that no one is safe unless you're the Emperor or Darth Vader. And Vader in A New Hope chokes out another officer on the Death Star, so it's like you can be as high up in the military as you want to the point that you are literally on a super weapon. And if Vader doesn't like you that morning, oh well, like
I
you
can't
had a
believe
good
the
run.
leopard ate my face type of
I
thing. Yep.
exactly. So, you know, we know that the Death Star has to be blown up, but like that is a government installation, right? It's what the rebels do is the equivalent of someone going to like the Pentagon and just
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
blowing it up. Sorry to our FBI agent. I'm sure we're already on a watch list,
We are on
but
the list. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
I was thinking about them. It's like I need to delete all my social medias. But
oh
they know
yeah, no,
already. They know. They
yeah,
know.
they know, they know. Look at our skin tone. They know.
Yeah.
They're already, they hear our accent and they're just like,
They have a
yeah.
plan in place already. Well, they used to have concepts of a plan, but clearly now they have those
Clearly it's a
concepts
plan now.
have become executive orders, so to
Yeah.
speak.
So, it's something that I always enjoy thinking about. And it was one of the things that I really enjoyed about Andor, where it was like there are moments where Mon Mothma is terrified. I rewatched earlier this week the Aldani arc,
Hmm. Hmm.
and hearing Mon Mothma's like fear after the operation goes down and just like, oh my god, I can't believe you did this. Like, this is terrible. The Empire's going to be so mad. And, you've got Luthen on the other end being like, what did you expect? Like, this is a revolution, not a petition drive. So,
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
something's going to go boom at some point, and why not us making the first strike? Um, so I'm very curious to see all that to say. I'm very curious to see and read this book and read this
Hmm.
trilogy because it is going to be more insight into Mon Mothma, into Saw Gerrera, into Bail
And Bail
Organa,
Organa. Yep.
and understanding like, can we work within this system, or is this something that needs to be destroyed? And then once you make that choice, it's one thing to say it; it's another thing to
To do it.
actually
Yeah. Yeah.
blow something up. And we, as we saw in Andor, Mon Mothma has some growing up to do. Like, we know that she's going to become an, unabashed rebel. If you've seen Star Wars Rebel, then you already know that at some point she's going to stop being a senator and like
Hmm.
sends out a transmission across the galaxy saying
Which
that the
we
Senate
might
doesn't
see in
matter.
live action in season two.
Oh, that'd be fun. That would be fun. Like having her get like stolen away. Maybe the
Yeah.
beginning half of that Rebels mission, because in
Be,
Rebels they
be,
already meet her.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about, and it's not really a spoiler, but there was a leak, or is it? I don't know if it's a leak actually, but a T-shirt came out. I don't know if you saw this on Blue Sky or Instagram, but a T-shirt came out for one of those marketing T-shirts for shows, like the one I'm wearing, right? A normal T-shirt for the show,
Yeah.
for Andor season two, and the art of it, it's a stormtrooper with obviously Star Wars graphics, and the graphics, it's like two characters running, and then it looks like it's a silhouette of Cassian, and then the other figure looks like a female, and it based on how they're dressed because it's silhouettes. It's not like
Uh-huh.
uh, uh,
Yeah, not detail shots or
not
anything.
detail, exactly. Thank you. And then the other one based on like the outfit looks like it's Mon Mothma. So she's like, oh, is Cassian rescuing her from Coruscant? And from the teaser that we've seen, we know that Cassian goes to Coruscant this season. So is this are we gonna see that? And is this book now gonna tie into Andor tangentially? Gonna start showing kind of all those threads. So
Yeah.
very excited. And it's one of those things where tonally it's fascinating that we started the year and with the ending of Skeleton Crew, which was so wholesome and fun and joyful, right, and inspiring, and be like, this is all the fun Star Wars can be. And now with P-47 and the horrors that we're witnessing, we're going back into the horrors of Star Wars with
Yes.
Reign of the Empire and Andor season 2. Uh, but I wanted to ask you, right? Because one of the main things about Star Wars is always hope, right? At the end, it's like even Andor season 1, it's despair and it's dystopia and it's the boot of oppression on everyone's neck. And despite trying to run from it, the boot's going to find your neck eventually. And it's how do you respond at that point when the boot finds you? And season 1, despite the darkness, ends in hope. It's Cassian deciding to fight and stand up for something that he believes in. And now, in your new position, which you're working with legislators and in politics and seeing the landscape of how everything's folding out, like what's your reaction to how the world is going, and what would you tell everyone in a
Yeah.
moment that seems hopeless?
Yeah, I would really remind folks that no matter how rough it gets, this is going to start kind of cliche, but it does get to a point. Um, no matter what is happening at the federal level, and I won't sugarcoat it in terms of like, yes, it's pretty rough out there. Um, the beauty of the federalist system is that there are, even when the checks and balances fail at the national level, there is still a degree of autonomy that exists at the state level, and then when
Mhm.
you drill down even further at the city and county level. um, even when the first kind of series of ice raids started in major cities, specifically Chicago, um, there was
Community, man, yeah.
complaints there was complaints from Trump's people of just like, oh, it's kind of hard to do some of these raids because like people know their rights. And I don't
Which
know
is a
the
messed up
exact.
thing to say.
Yeah, which is crazy. He was like, oh, people aren't opening the doors and people aren't responding, or they're not complying or whatnot. But
Mhm,
like, yeah, that's because you still have rights within like all of this nonsense that's happening. And then even to go like another kind of layer beyond that is your community is still there. Like, is there fear in that community? Absolutely. But like,
mhm,
even the city of Ferrix or even the planet of Ferrix, still at the end of the day, when they said we had enough, it didn't matter that Deidre was there. It didn't matter that there were death troopers. It didn't matter like, all the munitions that the Empire brought, and all of the force that they had being shown during Marva's funeral. Like, they still won the day. It
mhm.
still got bad enough that the Empire got their like, they just got can we curse? Sorry, I don't want to
Yeah,
get too.
we
Oh,
don't we
okay.
don't want to overdo it, but sure, let's do it.
Sure, sure. Well, yeah, they got their ass handed to them.
Oh, that's not
To
cursing. Come on, that's
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
child's
I
play.
didn't. Sorry. Pardon my French. I'm still learning. Um, but it's like you can still fight back. You can still take ownership and take control, and the same is true at the state level. Like,
Mhm,
California has fought back, Illinois has fought back, Colorado has made statements. Like, there's all sorts of different odds and ways
mhm,
that people can push back. And if you if you feel like telling your legislator at the national level is a hopeless endeavor, your state elected officials win their elections by less than 5 to 10,000 votes. You meet 5,000 people in a week, or like walk by them, depending on where you live in
mhm,
the United States. So, like, they will listen to you. They will take what you are saying to heart, and hear you out, because those elections are won on the thinnest of margins. So when you say, like, hey, you're my state elected official, and this is what I expect you to stand up for and
Hmm.
fight for, that carries a lot of weight because national elections are, tens of thousands of votes make the difference, but your city council member won by 500 votes. I'd be willing to bet. Your state elected official, whether it's the state house or the state senate, they won by maybe 2,000 votes or something. So, like, if you and your community, who are all represented by the same state elected official because of how tiny those district lines are, when you tell them this is what I expect, you will have a lot more traction, and you will find that there's a lot more just traction there, and just people like willing to listen and hear you out,
Hmm. Hmm.
in that sense. So yeah, fight the good fight, but start as local as possible
Hmm.
because that
Hmm.
is one, that's where you're going to feel the impact, right? Like whatever's happening in DC is happening, but when the ICE agent knocks on your door, it doesn't matter what the hell's happening
Hmm.
in DC.
Hmm.
It's now about what's happening right in front of your face. Um, so take that approach, and like you will find that there's community is still here. There's still joy around you. There's still
Hmm.
things we're celebrating, and if you hold tight to that, then you'll find a way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well said, and definitely something that I asked you so that everyone else could hear it, but I also definitely needed to hear it because I feel we, and when I say we, I mean me. We always read about like you have to unplug because this is a war of attrition. They want to overwhelm you, so that you just tune out and detach, so that then you become complacent. And there's still a moment in which it's true to an extent that you have to unplug because otherwise you're just gonna explode with the overload of information. But as much as I try to unplug, we have our phones with us all the
Mm,
time, and a lot of us have jobs in which our job is to be on a computer, so it's so easy to just slip back and change the tab or check your phone real quick and see all the horrors that are around, that it's important to, like we said at the beginning, take a step back and breathe. And I think what you said is important. I didn't want to say it that much because I feel like sometimes the whole joyous resistance thing can be just completely reinterpreted to being like, oh, let's just have fun and not forget about everything and just enjoy ourselves. And it's not the case. It's everything in good measures. We have to find joy because we have to live our lives in the best ways that we can, but also listen to the ground shaking and see where
yeah,
the wind's blowing so that we can take appropriate action, and like you said, like build our communities, which is what Triad of the Force is trying to do now in a more active way than we have in the last couple of years. We've always really talked about our podcasting community, our social media community, and like the friends that we've made through this podcast, and like our other ways of connecting with people, but we haven't really like done the most basic thing of bringing everyone together, which is like the easiest way, which has been the Discord channel, and we're definitely trying to do that now because it's more important now more than ever to find those communities to support each other and listen to each other and find ways to, like they say in Planet of the Apes, ape together strong. So
yeah,
we have to remain strong even though we feel weak, but there's still a lot of resiliency and strength that we all have and that we can continue to find in stories like Star Wars. I mean, yeah, they may be stories created by a conglomerate corporate empire, but the story was made by an indie kid from California who
yeah,
is a radical lefty who just wanted to tell stories about how Vietnam was bad and how Newt Gunray is a evil Republican and how trade wars can lead to the consolidation of power. So
yeah,
yeah, it might be owned by Disney, but the story rings true. It doesn't matter who made it. The lessons there,
absolutely.
and we can just keep repeating it, keep reading books like Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire because the truth is there, even though it's sugar coated with space wizards and space dogs and light speed and giant space whales.
Yeah,
So it's gonna
and
be it's gonna be rough, but
I've
we have each
been
other.
I've been thinking about how Rise of Skywalker ends, and like it really is just random people right? Like that's literally what they tell Allegiant
Hmm.
General Pride, where he's like, "Oh, they don't have a
Just people,
navy.
yeah.
Like, who are the? Yeah, it's just people, sir." Um,
And that's
so
what
yeah,
Lando says, right? Is how did you guys do it? It says we had each other. That's how
exactly.
we did it. And I said this. I've said this a couple of times, but there's the Joss Whedon cut of Justice League, which is one of the worst films ever made. One of the worst things ever committed to moving pictures. But
Fair.
there is one moment in which I'm just like, that was good. That was good. And it's the thing that one of the things that I hold on to now and the times that we're living in is that scene when the Flash doesn't know what he's doing because he's never saved anyone before, just pushes people out of the way, and then Batman just tells him, save one. You can save one person. That's enough. And I think that's where we're at now. We don't need to save the world because no one person can do that. Apparently, one person can destroy it, but one
That's
person
true.
can't save it. But if we all individually like do our act of kindness to save or help one person, I think we'll make it. We'll make it. So,
Yep.
like Leia said, if you only believe in the sun when you can see it, you'll never make it through the night. So
Exactly.
there we go. Thank you so much, Andres, for joining us and talking about Battle of Jakku, the Ray film, life, politics, and and everything in between. But before we sign out, why don't you tell everyone, what you're doing, what's up with 60 Minutes, and where can everyone find you? Even though it feels like we have less and less places to find people in social media.
That's true. Yeah, the places to interact are definitely shrinking. But I'm still on Threads. I'm not as active there since Mark Zuckerberg decided
Hmm.
to kiss the ring. But we're there as Sithty_minutes, I want to say. And then I am on Blue Sky as Sithty Minutes with no underscore. You can find us wherever fine podcasts are sold, delivered,
Hmm.
transmitted. Insert adjective there or word there. Um, and that is also Sithty Minutes. Our next episode is actually going to be about a Star Wars trading card game
Oh,
that I have been
fun. Hmm.
throwing myself at ever since the election and a little bit before, but definitely afterwards. Because it's just let me build community and just like have fun with other Star Wars nerds. So I'm going to be interviewing one of the local players who's kind of uh, also in the competitive scene of the game and just talking more about it. So we'll be doing that. And then when I'm not doing those interviews, then I'm working on politics.
Hmm.
But I like to view it from that lens of Leia. So I really try to not just doom and gloom the news to people, but be like, okay, here's an issue, but here's also a way that you can impact that issue.
Hmm.
So if you're looking for more of that, then please feel free to subscribe to the podcast. Follow me on either Threads or Blue Sky. I'm much more active on Blue Sky, so follow me there, and I'd be more than happy to engage, point people to resources, and just find a way to get through this together, which is the
Yeah.
only way we'll make it.
Because yeah, it's we can't sugarcoat it and say that it's not that bad because it is that bad. But as long as we have each other and we find like ways to support everything and fight back, we will make it. I mean, we are the
Yep.
rebellion, we are the resistance, and if we've learned anything from history, we will win. It might just look a little dark, but eventually,
Yep.
eventually the dawn shows up.
We
But
beat them once, we'll beat them
we'll beat him
again.
again. But thank you so much, Andres, for joining us. Like I said, I'll leave the script links down in the description below so everyone can find you. You're one of the great friends that we have in all these circles of Star Wars that we've made throughout the years. So very appreciative to have you. And for everyone that hasn't followed you through our podcast, I encourage you, please, to go and find Andres. An incredible knowledge in Star Wars, especially when it pertains to the political side of things. So if you want more of that flavor, please run immediately and follow so you can get all the good takes and all the good advice. And we have been Triad of the Force. Uh, we are in a sixth season, like I said, trying to celebrate 5 years, trying to find joy throughout it all. You can find us everywhere podcasts can be found: Apple, Spotify, I think Amazon. Who knows? The Anchor does the publishing. So wherever Anchor publishes, you can find us. If you want to see our faces, you can find us on the YouTubes as well. If you're over there, please make sure to share, like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications so we can continue growing our community. If you want to be a part of our community, you don't have to give us anything financially. Just join our Discord where we're trying to build community there so that we can continue our conversations and support each other there. Links for that are in the description below. If the invitation has expired, just DM us and we'll welcome you into the Discord immediately. But with that, thank you so much for listening to us and for celebrating our 5th year, even though it's not our birthday yet. But with that, may the force be with you and stay strong.